Welcome back to Design Carve Sell, where we featured stories of how people are starting their businesses as well as growing their businesses with CNC Technology. My name is Brandon, I am your host, and in this episode, we're chatting with Mark Janke of Overland Teardrop Trailers. Mark has built a great business in the pretty niche category of overland trailers, specifically these teardrop ones that we'll get into here in a minute if you guys don't know what that is. And we get into a lot of great topics in this interview, like how Mark actually got started by producing a documentary alongside of Ford, all about teardrop trailers, how he priced and sold his very first trailer, to some really good marketing and communication ideas to those of you who might have really long production timelines from order all the way to delivery. But first, let's jump into Mark's background, specifically how he got started making with his hands.
My grandfather was an inventor and mostly doing medical things for Shriners, and some of which are still in use like 30 years later. And then my dad is an engineer and had a wood shop at home, and we always had tools around. So I have vivid memories of smashing my fingers with hammers at a fairly young age, probably 5, when I was starting to build things in the backyard. Wasn't really building things, probably just piles of boards with nails in them. But I've always done that. And that was about the time I picked up my first camera as well. And so those two things have always been part of it. And they're both the same. They're both making stuff. So
what did you start out in profession-wise?
Profession-wise, I took business in college as one of my degrees. And then I went into education and was a teacher, school administrator for 14 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And in that was doing a lot of film and media and taught history. And as a teacher does during the summers, you're required to go to school, so you don't really get the summer off, but I collected a whole pile of degrees. And so got kind of a broad spectrum of things to be interested in. And that's where the teardrop thing came from eventually.
Yeah. How did you get into teardrops?
I sold a car and I bought a Jeep Cherokee, 90s Jeep Cherokee. And my wife, I told her, like, this is great. We're going to go camping, because I grew up camping my whole life as well. And so I was like, yeah, let's go camping. Let's put a rooftop tent on it. And this was 2007. There weren't a lot of rooftop tent companies in the US or in the world in general, outside of Africa and Australia. And she wasn't a big fan of it. As she put it, I don't want to haul babies up a ladder into a tent on top of the car. At which point I freaked out, because I was like, are we pregnant? What's happening here? We didn't have any kids. But she just was like, no, I don't want to do that. And so I was poking around on the web, which at that time compared to now was fairly primitive. And I found this website where this guy had blogged about his teardrop build. And it was built like a bunker. It was just way overbuilt. He was in Australia. And I was fascinated by this idea. And so I took the name that he used a couple times, Teardrop Trailer, and I started researching it and found that it was a thing that started probably in the early 1900s. And it was something that he brought back to do, like, backcountry camping, which is what we do. And when we're in Idaho, I can be 7 minutes from here. I can be on dirt in the woods. And I was like, oh, that seems like a good plan. So I ran it past my wife, who at this point had been entitled senior management for this whole camping project, because she had nixed my tent idea. And she was like, yeah, that's a great idea. So we went ahead and did it and built the first one in 2007.
So for people that aren't familiar with teardrop, and if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll have images and stuff as we're going through, but like, how would you describe it if someone is, I have no idea what you're talking about when you say a teardrop trailer?
And that's a term that's getting very confused right now because of industries trying to take advantage of the name of it. But it's basically, traditionally it's a 4x8 box, basically, that's shaped very aerodynamically. And the front part is a sleeping area, and in the back you open it up and there's a kitchen area in the back that you stand on the ground in. That's the traditional, probably the most popular version of what I would call a true teardrop today is a 5 foot by 8 foot. So it's wider. It has a queen size bed in the front cabin area, and then the back has the galley kitchen area.
I guess coming from like an RV side of things, like, this is much smaller, but it seems like it's a lot easier in terms of just being able to get in and out of places. And
yeah,
so you got everything you need, but it's pretty compact.
You've got most of everything you need.
Okay.
Um, it the ones that we make are 740 pounds, so you can pull them with anything. In fact,
Okay.
I have a picture. Maybe I'll share this picture with you of a customer who's pulled one with his lawnmower.
Yes, I would
Um,
love to see that. Yeah,
so it's a very light camping vehicle. It's very small, so you can take it into the backcountry, which you can't take a camper necessarily. You can't take obviously a motorhome or anything like that. And you can pull it with almost anything, which is the other great advantage. You got a Mini Cooper, you can pull it with a Mini Cooper. And so the trade-off with it is you have basically everything you need in an RV. You don't have a bathroom. So you have
got
to
it.
solve that problem, which some people do by putting one inside that little tiny cabin area, which
Oh
is
wow.
a sensationally bad idea. But
Yeah.
to each their own.
I'm looking at some of the pictures and I can't even imagine a bathroom in there with a bed.
Yeah,
That would be
it's a bad idea. But
that would
people
not
do
be.
it. Like, okay.
So you built your first one because you just wanted one personally. And how did it grow into, did people start asking, like, Cena, hey, could you build
Yeah.
me one as well? Like, how did that start?
It was an oddity at the
Okay.
time. And I had this very small garage that we couldn't even park our Subaru in. It was too narrow, very small. Hailed back to the 1920s, cars were a lot smaller. So I would pull everything out of the driveway, my tools, the trailer in whatever form it was as we were building it up. I pulled it out in the driveway to work on it during summer. And it attracted attention with people walking by or just I was even in my classes. I'd occasionally come in and there I might have a cut on my hand, or I'd have a little paint or something, and the students are like, "What are you doing?" And I'd tell them about this project, and so it just naturally started to attract attention. And then I had a fellow teacher who said, "You need to make a little, like 5-10 minute little documentary about this because it's tied to history so tightly, and I could show it in my class." And so I thought, yeah, that'd be a cool idea. So I shot what I had and then, shared it with him, and it became a part of American history that ties together a whole bunch of different topics in a creative way, like World War II and the Industrial Age and the 1950s, the highways that come in, V8 engines. So it tied into all of those different things that you traditionally study and then some that you don't traditionally study.
Yeah. And so you said you produced that documentary. Is that the one that you have listed on your website? Is that the same one?
That that was the thing that started the documentary.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I
Gotcha.
made that little 5-10 minute thing, and then I was invited to the US Library of Congress to help them. They invited, what, 9 of his teachers or something to help put together some stuff that they could use or they could help schools with across the US, digitizing stuff, nerdy stuff. And while I was there, I was talking to one of the librarians, and she said, "What are you currently interested in?" And I mentioned Teardrop Trailers, and she mentioned a couple of other librarians there. And when I got home, my email box was already starting to fill up with
Oh, wow.
information they were sharing with me. So I had all of these resources just coming at me. And she was in contact with the Smithsonian, was in contact with the RV Hall of Fame. And from there, it just mushroomed into a project that took over my life. Like Ford stepped in and sponsored it, Glacier National Park, and it turned into this. It turned into a giant thing that I had no intention of ever doing.
Yeah,
So
that's what I didn't realize it was that big.
yeah,
That's crazy. When was that? Was that like 2007? Did I say that right?
that was we started shooting 2008 and
Eight.
9, and then Amazon published it, and that's when things really blew the top off. Amazon published it in 2011.
Okay. I don't know where I got 2007 from. But so when Amazon published it, it seems like there's a lot of attention potentially coming your way. Are you thinking of this as a business at this point, or is this like a hobby you love and you just want to tell everyone?
Yeah, that was funny because the first little 10-minute thing that I'd shown had circulated through our area, and I went to a concert, and this lady walked up to me and she said, "You're the teardrop guy." And I was like, "Yes, I have one. I don't know if I'm the teardrop guy." And she said, "You're going to build me a teardrop." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm a teacher." And she was relentless. She's just like the bubbliest, happiest, like greatest person. And eventually she's like, I'll pay. I'm going to cut you a check. How much do you want?" And I had no clue at that point. What is one of these going to cost? I had no supply chain. There was no business. So I said, let's just take information. You can think on this. and maybe it'll go away. But in the meantime, I called a friend of mine and I said, hey, do you want to build one of these with me? Because we had summers off. He was a teacher too. And he was like, yeah. And so we eventually made contact. She became our first customer, and that was early 2008.
Okay.
And it was like the perfect time to start a business when the economy is going down the tubes. It actually helped us out in a major way. In our thing, having the economy go down was a massive help. So it really helped launch us.
Yeah. How was it helpful?
People at that point, gas prices were high, and then the economy drops. So you have high gas prices and low income, people not wanting to spend a lot of money. And that means that they want something that's more fuel efficient, something that's less expensive, but they still want to go camping. And so 2009 for us was just like astronomical for us at the time.
Yeah.
Because the economy, people were downsizing, and that was us.
It's like the ultimate tiny house, but just in the woods.
In the camping
world.
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
That's cool. Okay, so going back to the first build that you did, you mentioned like she asked for a price, I'll pay whatever, and you had no idea. And I know a lot of people that we talk to when they first get started really have a hard time figuring out like how are we going to price the stuff that we're going to make. So like at that point, what did you do? Did you just look at materials, or what was that process like for you?
Yeah, we hadn't formed all the relationships and the supply chain and all of that. Thankfully, my business partner, his parents own a hardware store in Michigan. And so they had a lot of that network that we were able to lean on initially. And so I'm thankful for that. So we had ways into the RV industry through them because of hardware, and they're near a lake. So there's a lot of marine parts that are in RV parts. And so we had a lot of those catalogs that we could use. And so what we did was we came up with the cost of the parts, and then we added an amount on the top, and I don't remember what it was, but it was basically to pay for our shop.
Okay.
To just the tooling of our shop. And then we didn't count our time at all.
Okay.
And so it was really just, let's get set up with this one trailer. That's the goal with this one. That's not the way I would price it now for sure, but I'm not in that phase of business either.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people do that. And I've done that actually a few times. I'll accept a project and basically, price it at cost plus, this is a cool tool that I'll have to get. So this is like a good excuse to get it. Okay. So speaking of tooling, what did you need to get? Like, what did it need to make one at this point?
There's really 3 layers of tools that people can build these with. And you can go really basic, which is what I built my first one with, was mostly hand down tools. Both my grandfathers had passed away, and I inherited some of their gear. And so it's really just like a router, a jigsaw, skill saw, or a table saw, and some sanders, and then just some basic hand tools. And you can do that just that simply, which is why you see people building them in the early 1900s, probably in their barns. But then you can scale it up, and you can go, okay, now we're going to introduce things like bandsaws and trunks full of clamps. And with adding that layer, you just get faster at it, but you also get a better product out of it. And then the third layer is really where X-Carve lands with CNC technology. And that is just to say, cut this. And it's super precise, and your joints are amazingly strong. And, it's just leveled up from there. So where we started was with kind of tier 2 of those tools. So we had a big table saw, and we had, benches with routers in them and sanders and all kind of the bigger stuff, metal chop saws, giant air compressor for all the air tools that we had, and all of that stuff. But really, you only need a basic set of tools.
Yeah. Is it more or less like just a really massive cabinet for the most part? Just with some specialized stuff added on? Okay.
It's the exact same material, and it's the exact same building techniques for the most part. If it's quality built.
Cool. Okay. So then going from there, the documentary comes out. At that point, were you set up, or were you thinking of this, I want to start bringing in orders, like I want to start building this a little bit more than just a kind of side hustle?
It was, at that point, it was already going. Like we've never advertised. Never. Okay. It's always just come to us, and usually fire hose to the face style. So it's always just more than we can take. And so we just go as fast as you can go. And just keep everybody informed. Say, look, it's going to take us a little bit to get to your order. We'll get to it as fast as we can, but we also want to make sure we turn out really high quality work. And the goal that we've always had, in the documentary, I told the story about a guy named Larry Shank who inherited a trailer from his dad, who bought it right after World War II. And basically tore it down, then rebuilt it immediately. He was an aeronautical engineer, so it has all these weird engineer ideas that are genius in it. And he left it to Larry. Larry still camps in it today. And that's from 1940 to 2022. And you don't find an RV lasting now, typically today. And so our goal was to make something that is an heirloom. And so we went with the high-end quality everything and did a ton of testing on everything to make sure you could produce a trailer that would last the rest of your lifetime and then go into your estate and your family can fight over it or whatever. But the goal is to make something really nice that would last a long time.
Is this full-time for you now?
No.
Or is this... Okay, it's
No,
not.
we were still doing summers, and I was
Okay.
building some during the winter. We could have, in retrospect, we could have done that.
Okay.
But I was deep into my career
Right.
and saw that as the way to go, even though if stepping back, like a teacher's wage versus what I could do now is like,
Yeah.
and then the freedom of like being able to go to the bathroom whenever you want to. Like there's just those little things that teachers can't do that, yeah, I get to do that anytime I want to now.
Yeah.
But at the time I didn't know that. I just
Right.
hadn't thought of it. So it wasn't full time. My business partner went full time with it in 2012 or 13. And I stepped into a slightly different role where it was mostly website media stuff, blogging, that sort of thing that was informative for our customers, but then also just informing the community. This is what teardrops are.
Right.
And this is what our product is as well.
Are you full-time currently?
I'm full time.
Okay.
And that was 2017.
Okay.
And then my business partner left in 2019. And so it's just my gig now.
Yeah. And I guess that might bring me to something I thought was pretty interesting is that you sell both plans and kits. So it isn't just a build me a trailer, then you roll up with a trailer behind a lawnmower and you're good to go.
It's kits, parts, and plans. And I made that shift. The teardrop community has primarily two markets. And we've always had this. The people who want one that's completely done, and then the people who want to build it themselves, because it's a simple enough trailer. It's a few thousand parts, but for the most part, it's very basic. There's no plumbing involved unless you really want to involve it. I never have. There's stuff like that that you can add to it. But like you said, it's a cabinet. And then you have to make sure you fit certain codes for transportation and all of that, which is fairly basic if you know what it is. And we've shared that with everybody anyhow. But it is something that is, you can either go with the built version or the home built version. I started with the home builders, and that's more or less my heart is. And because of the way things were going starting in June of 2018 until just like a year ago, as far as supply chains, inflation really started taking off in 2018 with parts, with the first round of 12 government tariffs that have kind of taken a giant chunk of the RV industry and sent it to China. Things got really tumultuous. And so it was easier for me to say, instead of buying a whole pallet of something that I may not be able to get, I can talk to a DIYer and say, can you find this? And they could find those things out there. I just can't find them in mass. And so it became a logical choice and a place where my heart was anyhow, just to serve DIY builders. So I am building, but I'm not producing trailers anymore.
Okay.
These are like special requests type things,
Right.
or for myself. I'm going to build another one this year for myself because I keep
Gotcha.
selling ours.
And so primarily then, is it the plans that, or are you still doing the kits? You're just not doing the full builds altogether?
We do full kits, partial kits. There's all sorts of kits. We have a frame kit that's probably our most popular because people are more frightened of metal work, it seems, than the woodwork, at least in our community. And to have a lot of that already done for you and just shipped to you in a box is nice. And then we have partial plans, or partial kits, I should say, that aren't the entire thing, that just saves on shipping. Then we have the full-blown, everything is there type kit, and then the plans for all of it. And right now we just have one of the models that basically we took what we were manufacturing and turned it into DIY.
Okay.
And so there's another one coming, but I want to make sure it's right before we release it.
So going to more of the CNC side of things, you had mentioned before we even started that you started outsourcing some of that work to like a CNC shop. Was that specifically to do the kits, or was that like just along the way as you're doing like full builds?
When we were doing full builds, we started out with a plywood template and a router doing that. And eventually we gave that plywood template away to a customer, and we went to CNCs. And that was 2009 that we went to CNC. So they were cutting 5x10 sheets of plywood for us and doing that. Yeah, they could cut a whole side for the trailer, 5x10 sheet with multiple bits in about a half hour. And it was just it was an enormous time saver. And it was so more precise than we could make in shop in-house. So it was like, yeah, that's a duh.
Mhm.
So we went that direction in 2009. And then we did get the X-Carve in-house so that we could make small parts on demand, because things started heating up in our area for housing, and CNC became harder and harder to access through all the businesses here, but especially our friends who were running the other one. And so we started producing some of those and just having them make the big stuff.
Now, and you said the X-Carve Pro is pretty recent, but that's one that you have with you now. So that's going to be more for your builds.
Yeah, the X-Carve Pro I just got a few months ago. I am in the midst of problem solving a few things with our design to make it work with the X-Carve Pro, but then also to be able to tile a full sheet through it.
Got it. Okay.
In-house is just like this fascinating idea to me. I know a lot of home builders right now aren't going to run out and buy an X-Carve Pro so they can build their teardrop trailer. That doesn't make any sense. But
Right.
it is a technology, as you guys know, that is coming, and prices are going to drop over time, and it will soon be like a table saw. I want to show how it can be done so that people don't have that learning curve to hit on top of this new machine. Like, oh yeah, I can do this. So it's cool to me to think that I can make a full sheet plywood trailer in a small garage and produce a high quality product as a result of that. Same thing that I would get from my commercial partner just a few miles away.
The kit side of things, those are still manufactured, just outsourcing that to, but still like a CNC shop.
We're actually moving that in-house.
Okay, really?
We're
okay,
slowly moving that in-house. We live in the fastest growing county in the United States right now. And so
really? Okay.
Getting access to anybody builder, anything related to materials is really hard. And I think our CNC, the last time I talked to them, they said it was about 14 to 16 weeks before they could look at any orders from us.
Huh.
And that's too long of a lead time to have for us. And so we're starting to pull some of that in-house. I'm curious if this X-Carve Pro will be able to, if we can get it actually going, I may move it out of the small shop we have and put it in a big shop and start pushing, stuff through it as kits.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm already producing some kit material off of it, larger stuff that I've not done before in-house. So already it's helping with that, which is great.
You've mentioned designs a few times. What is that workflow? Like, do you 3D model this stuff up and then you're saving the outlines to send to a CNC? What is that for you?
Yeah, initially it was just I draw something on a piece of legal paper and hand it over and just say, do this.
Do this, yeah.
But then, as time goes on, you're like, okay, I want to be able to tweak this thing, or I want to be able to do a custom thing for a customer who maybe wants to switch a fender off. And so I need to change where the fender bolts through the sidewalls of the trailer are. And I want to be able to just delete them and add some others, or just have two different files easily done without having to call somebody and go through a whole chain to get that thing done. I want to be able to do it right now. And there's no reason it shouldn't be able to be done right now. And so that's when I stepped into more drafting and learned the easiest step in, or the most obvious at the time, was SketchUp. And so I started playing around with SketchUp and was like, yeah, this is good, but it's pretty limited in some of the key ways that I wanted more flexibility in, or it's too difficult for some things. And so I'm in Fusion 360 now. And so I do all of that workflow, and then I export it into easel, and then in easel do any last minute tweaking just for the piece and go from there. So when I tile, I don't do that in G code. I do that as a picture, because the G code is bigger than the bed of the X-Carve.
Yeah, that workflow definitely I've heard, especially when you have like a design that you just want to modify, and just use parameters inside of Fusion. It's super helpful. Just type a couple things in and it all changes. So On the business side, looking back to when you started, is there advice you would give to people that are thinking about starting a business? Some things you wish you had known to think about when you're first starting out?
I was thankful to have my partner who had complementary skill sets to mine.
Okay.
And I learned a lot from him. So I don't know that you need a business partner. Sometimes that's a good idea. Sometimes it's an extremely bad idea.
Right.
But I think there are three types of business people. And I think it's good to have all three of those involved in some way. There's the creative, which I am definitely the creative. And I believe a lot of X-Carve people are probably creatives. And you get so distracted by what you're creating that you forget the numbers. And where a business is going to make it or not is in the numbers and not necessarily in the product that you're producing. You make the nicest thing on earth, but if there's no demand for it, if your profit margins aren't right, if your time isn't right, if you're not getting metrics on everything, then it's going to be a lot harder to succeed, or it's going to stagnate, or it's just not going to go. And so for me, it's numbers. It's all about analytics. It's all about accounting, and the product is in there. And the creative bit I get to do once in a while, but for the most part, I pay hard attention to the numbers. And I think that is a make it or break it for especially any business that's selling on the internet outside of their local area. But even in their local area, I would say you must pay attention to the SEO and to your website. And that has way outperformed our local market. Okay. So it's insane, hundreds of times more outside of our local.
So then on the marketing side, is it the website mainly and then like videos on YouTube and like social media?
Yeah. We really don't do a lot on social media. I have social media channels and I occasionally share on there, but the website is the primary focus, is like that's going to draw all that natural traffic. And then YouTube is something that I'm introducing in 2022 in a bigger sense. And that's just education mostly. And as a result of that, every video that I've produced there has produced thousands of dollars of sales. It's not money made off of YouTube, but it's made because of YouTube, I guess is the way of putting it. And then word of mouth is massive for us. And we had a weird business model. I think every business is going to be different, but when you have a documentary that Amazon releases and it's sponsored by Ford and all these other big companies, and you are tiny at the time, it can launch you into a very big arena very fast. And we intentionally decided to go at an intentional pace, more like Patagonia does. They determine they're not going to grow more than 2% per year in their product offerings and stuff like that. And that way they can get their product. And we didn't even know Patagonia did that at the time, but that's the same approach we took, which is very intentional, make sure it's done right, and really take care of the people who we are, our fellow campers who are building their own at this point or buying from us.
You mentioned the numbers being such a huge deal, and there's definitely a problem if you're not getting any sales, but then it sounds like there's also a problem if you're getting way too many sales and you just can't keep up with the demand. The whole supply chain sounds like it's crazy.
Well, and if you get too many sales, this is something that nobody teaches you because everybody's teaching you how to get more sales, which is cool, but what if you don't have that problem? What if you have the opposite problem? It really just comes down to really good communication and systems. So we put a ton of systems into the business so that customer support is solid. There's information at fingertips. There's communication reminders. Hey, this person, I'm going to communicate with you next week and let you know how things are going with the laser cutter for the frames or whatever it is. There's just constant communication, just letting them know we're working on your thing and we're going to get there. And that's really something that hit home to me when I visited Disney World. It's just a random thing, but I can't stop thinking about business. But Disney World, we were waiting in line to go to the Millennium Falcon. Going in, everything, every single detail of that experience going in and coming out is designed to make you feel like you're there. And then they have these little QR code games as you go along. And it's all just about taking care of the customer and helping them experience this thing that they haven't experienced yet, but to just continue to let them know, we got you. It's okay. You're waiting in line. And that idea, when you have too much demand, it goes a long ways versus you take the orders and then you don't say squat until it ships in 3 months. There's a lot of businesses that do that. The other thing that I think is key is on the website to list accurate inventory numbers. And I do those every single day. because another thing that a lot of businesses are doing is that they will just take the order and then they'll come back at you and say, oh, we're out of stock, but we'll get that in a couple of weeks. And I want people to know right up front, yep, that's what it is. You bought it. We'll ship it.
That marketing timeline is super interesting. I don't think if anyone's ever described it like that before, but what's your lead time, or like an average lead time when someone buys a kit or a trailer?
Oh, that's a great question. Since 2018, it's been bananas. It's been all over the place. It's starting to recover and we're starting to get more of those jobs. We're starting to be able to get parts again. And so that's all over the map right now. And it changes by the month, but right now it's about 3 to 4 weeks for a full size kit, which is like 2,500 parts.
Yeah.
And so it's 3 or 4 weeks to do that. Though the CNC cut stuff we can have done almost immediately. As far as the wood, we do have CNC cut metal frames as well. And that typically takes a bit longer because that machine is something I will never buy.
So on the communications, and you also mentioned you had like systems in place. So is it like, how do you set up like that kind of reminder system if somebody wants to do something similar?
We use Google for our business communication, and built into Google, we have put in Streak, which is a CRM that allows you to track orders as they come in. And so as an order comes through, we just drop the customer into a different level. We're able to keep notes with conversations or emails that we've had with that person. Say they have a particular thing they want to make sure they have in their trailer, we can make sure it's there. And then the communication, one of the first things that we do if you buy a kit and you have to wait is we'll send the user manuals or the builder's manuals out right away. And that way they have all of the information, the process that it's going to take to build, and they can get their space prepared. Because sometimes they're like, oh, I was unprepared. I need to get this particular tool, or I need more space than I thought to be able to build this thing. Or I'm going to need people for this part of the build, and be able to communicate with those people in advance. Like putting the body on the frame is usually when people are needed. I can do it by myself, but I built these a lot since 2007. I'm not just the first time builder. So that's part of it. And then as time goes on, if there is a delay in production for some reason, then we have other things. We'll just send them a reminder or just give them an update or shoot a picture of this is us working on your project right now. We have this many steps left and then we'll be able to ship. I'll be in contact with you next week. It goes a long ways to be that personal with communication. And I really push that hard, even if somebody's not a customer. So somebody will reach out to me and say, hey, I am interested in a kit. It is faster and more personal for me just to shoot a video on my phone and just say everything. And then I upload it to Vimeo, which has private links that are better than YouTube's private links. And then I just send them a private link on an email and say, hey, I shot this video for you that explains everything. And I can do that in 2 minutes versus crafting some sort of email. Plus, I get my body language, and communication is just a lot easier. So I love that personal touch whenever possible. Sometimes, like right now, we're getting to heavy season. It's getting harder and harder to do that because we're heading into camping season and demand is up.
That communication piece is a great tip for people to take away. Just how it's so easy to potentially personalize it, especially when you're working on their project. I know when I've ordered some things, it's fun to get like updates along the way of what it's looking like going through the process. But I want to say thank you first off for taking the time. Don't want to take a ton of your time because it sounds like you are getting busy, but we appreciate you chatting. Looking forward to seeing what you continue to make. But for people that do want to follow along, is your website, is that the best place you'd send them?
Our website's overlandtrailer.com. And if people want to learn more about teardrops and making their own, our YouTube channel is at youtube.com/overlandtrailer.
Well, thank you so much for chatting.
Thank you guys also for making a nice product.
Yeah, we enjoy when people actually get to use it. So it's always fun to see what you guys are making.